truck restrictions on
And that
any
comes
of the
under
other
what
streets.
again?
A little later in my presentation, I'll get to a section on updating the city transportation master plan. I was going to mention that at that point. So,
All right, thank you.
Project A6 would be what it would do would replace the span wire traffic signal at Van Buren and Saraville with a permanent signal once Saraville and Van Buren are improved in that area. Yeah, A6 is right at the intersection of Van Buren and Saraville Avenue. So those cover the 6 ADOT related projects. Based on revenue projections that finance anticipates over the next 5 years, there should be enough money to do all the projects listed except for A1, which is that piece of Indian School up on the east side of the 303. And for that project, we're currently exploring another funding source. But if that does not come through, then this project may need to be pushed back out of the 5-year plan into year 6 of the CIP.
By category, what are the funding sources?
The two that I'm aware of would be the arterial street development fee and some general fund monies.
We talking one-time construction sales tax money, or are we talking the money that's used for day-to-day operations?
I'll have to research that and answer that. I can't answer that question right now.
I mean, we have our ongoing operation money, and I just want to make sure we're using capital money for capital projects and ongoing for ongoing.
That is certainly our intent, Councilman
Okay.
Pizzillo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Ms. Wally.
I have a question. On your A number 1 at Indian School in 303, have we ever done a automobile count to see how many folks actually use that? Because that's a very, very busy intersection. And the thought that we're not going to expand it from either 2 to 4 lanes concerns me. And I think that's just as important as, because they're going to finish the 303 over in that area. They're going to do those stack. And it's just another way to move traffic, because people that are coming from east to go westbound use Indian School. And it's just really very, very busy.
We have traffic counts that I believe are about 2 years old, so we're going to be taking traffic counts before they begin construction
Okay.
on that section of the freeway.
Okay.
In fact, at Indian School and even on Saraville, just so that we know kind of the before and after situation.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, how do we determine A1 doesn't make the list, but all the rest of them do?
Thank you. That's a good question. Good question.
Well,
Similar concerns.
they all make the list. It's just that we haven't identified a funding source for A1. We're working on a funding source for A1, but they're all considered priorities.
So how does A6, for example, or A3 get a funding source and A1 doesn't?
I guess at this point it hadn't been on the CIP previously. It was a new project that was introduced in response to the freeway construction.
Can
Isn't
we
that
re?
similar to the way MAG does it if it's introduced at a certain point? I mean, that's kind of traditionally the way it's been done. I mean, on the funding sources, am I wrong in that assumption?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's kind of a process that I think has been passed down from how it's been done. Now, you have a suggestion that.
Well, but it's our CIP.
Yeah, I know it's our CIP,
So
but it's a
no, I'm just
process
making
that
sure
we use it.
we control that, right? So if collectively we all say, A1 needs to get funded first before,
Oh,
I guess, do we have that latitude to make that change is where I'm going with that.
Yes, we do, but explain the process that it has to be on the TIP before it can move forward.
We would
The MAG TIP.
Yes, any project of regional significance, which this would be, we would introduce and make sure it's on the MAG TIP. But I think that could be done.
That's my point.
And then I guess
Or it doesn't get funded.
I guess the feedback is if you're saying that should be considered a high priority, then we would take that information back and address it in the CIP that we would bring to you next month.
Right, so if we were to say, just as an example, A4 it does not meet the council's priority, and A1 does, and we'd like to shift the funding to that.
Is the kind of feedback that we're looking for.
Is that a high hurdle to get over?
John,
So-
could you interject something here? It might explain about funding, because I'm hearing some kind of questions back and forth. So you're saying, is the funding all within our reach? We don't depend on any of the other funding sources through MAG for this? Is this what you're saying? So why
No, I'm saying
can't we prioritize that above, even if it's not on the CIP?
Even if we've got MAG money for it, and we say, look, this has actually got a higher value to both the region and the community than, say, another project?
Would we be able to use the sources if
Yes.
they just weren't our sources alone, but they were some of the other
Yes,
MAG
thank you.
sources? Okay, that just one. Okay, you want to answer that?
Can you make a comment on that, David?
Yes, I think the feedback that we were hoping to get tonight would be your comments on the priorities. So these are all priority projects, but if you deem that one is the highest priority, we would take that back and address it in the CIP, draft CIP that we bring back to you next month.
I'm sorry.
No, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, have you prioritized them yourself? If you were to say, you know what, actually A1 in our own priority list would come before some of these others, but it's the funding source was the issue.
We've personally thought about it. I guess we see Saraval and Indian School as fairly equal in significance in terms of improvement. But I mean, Indian School is a major corridor from Litchfield all the way to the 303, and now it's even a major corridor into Buckeye, into Verado, et cetera. So I think we'll probably reevaluate that. What I intend to do tonight on each grouping, I'll tell you the ones that are covered and those which are not. And actually, when I get to the economic development set, which is coming up next, they might provide some other options on how to fund this project.
Just a clarification on the funding, though. Whoops.
Just do me a favor, everybody kind of look at me and so I know who's going to be addressed first, because some people are at the same time.
Right.
Okay, Joe?
Just for clarification, is this MAG funding these A projects?
None of these have MAG funding.
Oh,
Okay, because I hear this discussion going back, and it's almost like this is on MAG's list and MAG funding, and they've prioritized it, so we got to go before MAG to change these. Where that's not the case.
We have to go before MAG just to make sure that the project is shown on their tip as locally funded. That's the only.
So in a
That's
sense,
okay. All right. I just want to make sure I understand.
Yes.
yeah, that's what's a difficult part. In a sense, though, we still have.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't clear. None of these projects are MAG funded. at this time.
so why are we talking about MAG then?
Well, later on, like in the economic development list of projects, there's one project, actually two projects that potentially could have some MAG funding if you would choose to go that direction.
I have one more little quick
Yeah,
question.
I'm going to go to Laura Town because
Okay.
we've had several.
Yeah, now that I see that it's not, I guess I kind of agree. It seems to be the consensus that A1 seems to have more of a value going to the freeway than A5, for example, which is further off the freeway. But I think the traffic counts would probably help us to determine that. There might surprise us all. I don't know.
That's true. That's very true. Yes, City Manager?
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to comment. The reason we're talking MAG is the fact that all of these projects must be on the MAG TIP as locally funded before we can proceed with it.
That's what I was trying, the point I was trying to make.
Isn't that amazing?
And my
Councilwoman-
question
Councilwoman
is,
Campbell.
when was this list made up? In what year?
The city list of
Obviously,
50 or the MAG list? Or,
The list we're talking about, that it has to be on that list for us to do whatever we want to do.
it's an ongoing process every year to add or delete projects from that list.
Okay, so last year, we had this discussion, and this was not on the table. This year, this is on the table. So if we tell them we'd like it to be on that list, Do they tell us we can't do that?
They never tell us we can't. They want it to be on the list if we're intending to move forward with
Yes.
with construction.
Whenever we don't put
It
things
must be on the list.
If we don't put things on the list any longer, that we're not moving forward that we can't see the funding. Is that correct? My understanding that we can't perceive that we have funding for it.
My concern, Mayor, about the Indian school, I don't understand why it has not been on someone's radar, because they have been developing homes over there. This is not, they haven't built all of these homes in the last year. They've been there for several years, and the traffic is of such. And Indian school is 2 and 3 lanes, and then it goes down to 1 lane very abruptly, and there's always a huge backlog, and I don't know why the city hasn't had it on their radar before.
Are you talking about the backup from as you pass Pebble Creek in that area? You're talking about the 303 to
Yeah.
that? There's nothing been built there until
No, but
just
all the
recently.
homes, there are coming this way. You know what I mean? All of that development along, up until that cotton field, all those homes weren't there when I moved here in 2000, but they're all there now. So all of that traffic, I think, is going in there, and we need to be proactive on this thing, I think. And I don't understand why it hasn't been on our radar before
I
now.
agree that you have to be proactive and on it, but it's all back to funding. And as we can see this now, because now we see all the traffic there, but the people before us and the people who are working this, in my view, it's just, you can't build where it isn't there yet, where the homes aren't. And so I don't know if you ever really, I don't think it's perfect. I don't think the process is perfect.
Yeah, but he said he can invoke whatever that he could have developers pay for it after the fact if we did it. So-
That land is in the ACUS area and has a very low probability of being developed in the near future, so that if we want the road, or if we want it to become 4 lanes, we're going to have to do it, especially as a result of now that the 303 is actually being built. Several years ago, the 303 wasn't on anybody's radar here. The city was dealing with the I-10 widening, and now is where they put the money. And now as a result of new development, the I-10 widening, the interchange coming in, and the 303 actually getting built, all of a sudden we're seeing the results of that. And no landowner is going to put any money into that area. They're going to grow cotton or vegetables or whatever on that. So if we determine that it's essential for traffic, then unfortunately the city is going to have to pony up the money or find a source of money. We can't get any money unless it's on MAG's list. We can't even build it or plan it unless it's on MAG's list.
But can we put it on MAG's list and then
Yes.
find the money?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yes.
all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
So you didn't understand why it wasn't on the list before?
No,
is-
I just didn't understand
Well,
why
I
it
think
wasn't on
the
the list
exciting
before.
thing we're going to be discussing here soon is back to the citywide traffic study that
Yeah.
we wanted
That
4
we
years
wanted
ago.
4 years
That's right. That's right.
And, so
I'm sorry, David, go ahead. Is
Okay,
everybody
good.
okay if he goes ahead?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Oops, I keep wanting to go the wrong direction. Okay. The next category would be the economic development projects, the projects that would support economic development. We're recommending the following 5 road projects based on the discussion that transpired during the economic development work session on February 6th. I'll run through the 5 projects. E1, Yuma Road, 4 lanes between Goodyear Boulevard and Bullard. E2 would be the Yuma Road Bridge at Bullard Wash, which is in that segment of roadway. E3, Bullard Avenue between Van Buren and Yuma. E4 would be a replacement of the span-wire traffic signal existing at Yuma and Bullard with a permanent signal. And then E5 would be a new west entrance into the freeway. You see two options up there, because I guess the preferred would be the one to the left, which would be off of Bullard, if we can acquire right-of-way to build it there or to have it built there. If we can't, then it would come directly off of Yuma, which is that one to the right.
David, on E5, what don't we have rights? Doesn't Sun MP own that land, and doesn't it have platting and approval, and a roadway alignment has been put into that project already?
It's been planned, and it probably has preliminary plat approval. I don't believe a final plat's ever been recorded on there, so the right of way has not been dedicated.
Okay. But there is preliminary plat approval
Yes.
for the southwest version of E5.
Yes, and that location isn't precisely where it's shown, but it's just a schematic. It would come off the road that they would build as part of their development.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Councilman
a real quick question. Isn't this the one we had discussed prior about the overlay, and part of the strategy was to make sure that before the improvements would be done, that we had the buy-in from the homeowners, I mean, not the homeowners, but the landowners, that they agreed with what we wanted that, use that particular stretch for? So I don't want to make an assumption, but I would think we'd be working on that first before we start any of these projects. Is that a little over?
Are you referring to Bullard Avenue?
Yes.
Yes.
Because it's my understanding, if we made all the improvements and they didn't buy in, they could still put whatever they wanted on there based on what they approved to build now. So if there's something we wanted to see different from an economic standpoint, we got to make sure that they're on board before we go building anything, because the leverage is gone.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
For E5, where it goes into the airport, and I'm sorry, it's taking me to time. I'm trying to look at the other ones. That would only go up to the airport property, the fence, right? Have we discussed how it's going to tie in, or do we know? Because it looks like we have two options. Have we discussed with the airport master plan what their current or their time frame is to tie into that, so we know which is best to tie in?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we have worked very diligently with Joe Husband on the access to the airport. They call it through the fence access, and this is very consistent with the plans that they would like to see.
Now, he did say, I just had a conversation with him this weekend, that he's going to be coming, do you remember the date? He's going to
I think
come
it's
and
March
brief all of
19th.
us on this, okay? So he'll give
I think
us-
it's March 19th.
Pardon me?
I think it's March 19th.
19th.
So is there preference in the first E5 or the second E5? I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out, which is their preference.
I believe their preference is the one to the lower left,
The longer one.
which is
one
off
is
of
there.
Bullard
Okay.
Avenue. That would be their preferred entrance. So again, looking at revenue projections over the next 5 years, there's enough money to essentially to design these improvements, but not to construct them, with possibly a couple of exceptions. The entrance to the airport, it's a smaller scope project, so there could be funds available for that. We were looking at E3, which is Bullard Avenue. We were looking at possibly bringing an option that would complete the intersection improvements at Van Buren and Bullard. Currently, we have it constructed in every direction except to the south. So it's possible you could consider improving the south leg of the intersection, say going south maybe 500 feet with the full width and the median and landscaping and even a water feature if that's the desire to have at that intersection, and even look at going east and west on Van Buren and completing the landscaping there to, I guess, to dress up that intersection. South of 500 feet, it would transition back to the existing two-lane cross-section. So we could probably, we're looking at that as a possibility of being able to include in the 5-year plan, that extent of the construction.
Excuse me, David, off of, this is obviously not part of the 5-year plan, but off of Litchfield Road and Yuma, heading west past the fire station, isn't that pretty small? Or is there no room for expansion in there because of the buildings on either side? I mean, it seems like if we were talking about, you know, moving people and moving traffic to an area, it seems awfully small in that.
I think it's wide enough well past the fire station up to the driveway back into the APS or wherever it is. That's when it narrows down quickly. I think it's wide enough
It's-
I
otherwise.
don't travel very
Yes,
often.
it's,
I can't think
it's
of it.
actually 4 lanes width until you get past the fire station, west of the fire station, then it
goes.
transitions to 2 lanes. But there is enough room to build 4 lanes.
Is there?
North of the airport
Just
fence.
it just seems like that would have been on the list, is all, just
Well-
because it's really narrow.
This project isn't on the list because it's needed to carry traffic. This grouping is more to support or encourage economic development in that area. It's not intended to, because it's
Agreed.
needed to carry traffic.
Agreed. And that's why I said it's not necessarily in those 5-year plans, but it just seems like it still would be an area where economic development would be traveling, and it's kind of a bottleneck there, so, okay, thank you.
Dave, didn't we already get a grant or something to do the design on Yuma Road at the bridge?
We got a MAG grant to design the bridge,
Okay.
which we completed, federally funded. And we have a remaining balance of, I think, around $600,000 that was unspent from that grant. And we had that transferred over to the Yuma Road, the roadway design for Yuma Road. And that's where it still is in the MAG system today. But we haven't moved forward with the design at this point.
And the reason is that if we move forward with the design, as I recall, the road will be roughly $13 million with the bridge and everything. If we don't match the project within a year or two,
What's the time frame on it?
then we have to pay back the money that the feds have provided to us. That's why we are not proceeding forward with this $600,000 expenditure.
What is the exact time frame?
I believe that how it works is from the time you complete design, you have 1 year in which to start construction or run the risk of having to repay the
That's
design
big.
cost.
That's a big chunk.
So we've designed the bridge, and we've designed the roadway improvement.
We've designed the roadway improvements to 30%. And we had asked them to move that balance over to the Yuma Road to bring it to 100%, along with all the clearances that are required.
Okay, so theoretically, we'll have all the design work done.
We could have all the design work done, yeah, if we moved forward with using the money that's been assigned to that.
But if we, just make sure I understand it, but now if we use it all, now there's an expectation that we're actually going to do the work.
There's expectation that within 12 months of approving the work, you move forward with construction.
Or we pay the original.
Full.
Or you run the
Okay,
risk.
just making sure I-
You run the risk of them requesting that it be repaid.
Okay, then it begs the question, why did we even start? Why did this even make it on the list?
Right.
If we had to have known that this was going to be a huge project, I would imagine it was on the same cost as Van Buren, which was a bridge and a multi-lane. How did we take money and then not intend to ever finish it?
We intend to finish it.
In the due time frame.
I don't know, in this day and age, if you're ever going to get the total amount of money to finish some of these projects at one whack. It just isn't in there. And am I right? Somebody that goes to MAG all the time, long before I started going to it, I mean, funds are short. And I mean, they are just doling out certain amounts. So I don't think we could get there. I mean, I agree. Nobody can disagree with what you're saying, Bill. Hey, let's build it. Let's say we want to build it, but that's not where the money is. That's not how the monies are being. MAG does not have the money. The government does have the money. And so now we've had to sort of what we call piecemeal to get partial projects done. Yes, Sherry.
I was just curious, on how long does the money stay? If it sits in this, like, back in MAG for this project, how long can we keep it there, just kind of, I don't know, resting, per se, until something turns around and we can piecemeal enough together? How long can
Probably not very much longer, because the problem is if the focus is on spending the money, obligating the money, and so they don't want it.
They don't want to hung
They don't want it sitting there too long. Otherwise, they would move it to a project that is moving forward.
Can we move it? Do they let us move it? I don't know what the rules are, so if it's a stupid question, I'm sorry. Can we move it somewhere else to some
We
of the other
can,
ones?
we can suggest, we can make suggestions on how it might be moved within the MAG tip.
The other stuff that
We don't have control over that, but we can definitely make suggestions on how that might be done. It would have to run through MAG and be approved.
Once we establish our priorities on all of these projects, and what they've done is they've grouped them, in 3 separate groups, but every project can, we're going to have a list of, as David said, there's a list of 50. We can continue to reshuffle the list, and then you submit it to MAG, and then what you can fund, you can actually build.
move that money over
You might be able to move some of that money over to what's authorized in the approved projects.
I think we better get on with this. Bill, was your questions answered? Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Dave.
I guess I'll just throw one more idea out. If you're, I guess, not inclined to do any of these economic development projects, it potentially could free up some money that could then be shifted back to that A1 project, that Indian school project on the first list, if you deem that a higher priority. The final grouping would be the growth-related projects, of which there are 5, and 3 of them have to do with sidewalk improvements, fairly minor sidewalk improvements, just to connect communities where development hasn't yet fully improved their frontages, so there aren't sidewalks. So, for example, G1 would build a sidewalk on the north side of Van Buren from Canyon Trails going east over toward the Compass Church, and where there is sidewalk, and then it could go from there points beyond. G2 is a sidewalk that would provide access primarily for students, but any pedestrians from the Centera development on the east side of Estrella Parkway at Goodyear Boulevard. The sidewalk would run south along the east side of Estrella Parkway to Yuma, and then on the north side of Yuma over to the Desert Edge High School to provide access.
As part of this, have you considered bike lanes at all? Because if I'm not mistaken, going down Estrella Parkway, not only is there not any sidewalks, but there's not bike lanes either. And since we've been using the ballpark as our central core for citizen activity and things like that, it would seem like we'd want to make it more easily accessible to people to use it in that way, biking or walking or whatever. And it was really funny because I hate to use this in as example, but when I came home from Belgium and everybody were on bikes and walking, and I was seeing a bunch of kids leaving the ballpark, they're all walking through the dirt field. There was no sidewalks, there's no bike lanes, there was nothing. I was like, oh, this is what's wrong with our, our system here. And so I just want to bring it up because you are talking about sidewalks. So I don't know where bike lanes are ever considered part of projects, I guess.
On Estrella Parkway northbound along Centera, when they improved their half of the street, they did put a bike lane. On the other side of the street, southbound, where it's undeveloped, like from Van Buren all the way down to basically the SAT site, there's no curb, there's pavement, and then there's a paved shoulder that has a stripe that there's a little strip. I don't know how wide, maybe 4 or 5 feet wide. The problem is when you get to Goodyear Boulevard, from Goodyear Boulevard down to Yuma, that was built under an old standard that didn't include bike lanes. It was it's just 2 lanes, curb, and no painted bike lane on the street. So that standard's no longer we no longer follow that standard on our new construction. So I guess to create one there, we'd have to widen the street. We'd have to redo the curb and widen the pavement, and then that might be something that would be considered, say, with the development of the city center in the future.
Wally?
If we update our city transportation plan, could we include bike lanes into that?
We will do so. In fact, bike lanes are on all our standards cross sections now.
Okay.
So new streets would have bike lanes.
Good. Thank you.
David, I'm just going to ask you, how are we doing on time? Do we need to lessen the questions right now, or to have you get through this because we have...
Actually, this section here is probably the key to the whole presentation in terms of getting feedback from you. So I think we're almost We're almost finished.
Okay.
I think everything on this slide is, can be funded, except for G4. We show four potential future signalized intersections. Three of them are along Estrella Parkway, and one's on Van Buren over by the entrance to Rancho Mirage area. We don't anticipate any. Those have all been brought up either by council or by residents in terms of putting signals in there. None of them are warranted at this time, and none of them are anticipated to be warranted in the 5-year plan. So, but we are tracking them, and so that when they're warranted, we wanted to have, I guess, the financial capability to install at least one of those traffic signals should it be warranted in the 5-year plan. So, we can cover one signalized intersection in that group.
Bill, do you have a question?
When we approved the apartment complex at Van Buren and Estrella, the question about traffic signals at, I think that's Centera and Estrella,
Yes.
came up, and the funding for that sounded like part of it was Centera, part of it was the apartment complex, part of it is that still?
Yes, and part of it will be the future developer of the property on the west side of the street.
Okay.
So, as I said, we don't anticipate any of those actually being warranted in the next 5 years.
Because we lump 4 signals together under G4, is it possible to just install one of them as we put this in the CIP?
I would recommend at most that we budget for one of those 4 signals.
Okay.
And have the resources available in case one of them's needed. We don't think any of them actually be warranted in the next 5 years, but it's possible that, I think the one that might be first would be the one on Van Buren at the Rancho Mirage entrance.
Yeah, I'm thinking either that one or the one if the apartment complex comes. So, okay. That answers my question. Thanks.
Okay.
I won't spend much time on this slide. These are kind of left over, or after we did the prioritization, came up with the 16 projects of the 50. These are some of the significant projects that were left over that would be in year 6 through 10, and some of these quite a few years beyond year 10. For example, widening Estrella Parkway between MC85 and Vineyard, widening the bridge over the river. I guess an important one would be Cotton Lane from I-10 down to MC85, creating at least 4 lanes in that area, since the 303 freeways, won't be in for a while. I really won't say much more about these unless you have any specific questions.
Questions?
I have one question. Why are we only doing a 5-year CIP program? Is that because of previous council decisions that we're not going to put a CIP program together unless we have dedicated funding sources? And then my second follow-up question is, well, shouldn't we put a priority of maybe looking at 10-year program, a 10-year priority program, knowing that some of these are unfunded, but every year we readjust the priority based on, the current conditions or money available or what we see happening?
I think historically we've worked on a 5-year CIP that's programmed based on revenue sources. And then anything that's not in the 5-year plan is in an out year. I think in some cases we've looked at the 5 to 10 or the 6 to 10 year horizon, and everything else is beyond there. And sometimes we just said anything that's not in the 5-year plan is an out year, and we haven't specifically defined when it would be needed.
I think I'd like to see in the future, I can understand living with a 5-year program that's funded, but I think the next 6 to 10 year out year program should have some kind of priority to it, at least so that it's reviewed by us, reviewed by the citizens, and reviewed by current conditions, so that at least we understand what's going to be reallocated. The out year stuff we know is not going to happen in a long time, but the 6-year stuff needs to be planned. Thank you.
Okay. One more slide on out-year projects. I threw this one here. This is the Sonoran Valley Parkway, Riggs Road, where the pavement ends to SR 238, about 13.5 miles. Quite a ways out in the future, probably. So where we get into the, I guess, the mag tip. First of all, I just wanted to give you kind of I guess my basic definition or purpose of the MAG tip. The MAG tip it's essentially the equivalent of the city CIP, except that it takes into account the projects that are being done by 25 cities, the state, the county, and some tribal communities, all in one planning document. So the purpose, it has several purposes. Some of the most important ones would be just I guess monitoring air quality and congestion under federal regulations. That's a requirement of the region to report and monitor, air quality and traffic congestion. So by accounting for all the different projects that are being done region-wide, MAG can put those projects into the model and project into the future, the impact on air quality and congestion. So it doesn't affect us directly. It affects the region directly because this has to be submitted to the feds. It has to be in compliance. If it's not in compliance, then there's always the possibility that some federal funding sources could become restricted. So that's one of the major reasons for making sure that the projects are correctly included in the MAG tip. So I just listed 3 groupings there of what types of projects are in there. Anything with federal funds has to be in there. I guess any project that's deemed regionally significant, that would be a project that would improve more than a half a mile of roadway, would be defined as regionally significant. And then local projects, anything that would impact the freeway or a freeway interchange would be in the MAG tip. They're not new, but they're newly, I guess, enforceable MAG tip guidelines that, I guess one of the primary ones is that any project that we put into the MAG tip has to show the funding source. If it's federally funded, we have to confirm that the local match is in our CIP. And the purpose for that is that they want to make sure that projects move through the system, don't get hung up anywhere for any issue, that there's no reason why they can't be completed, and the federal funds are obligated.
May I ask a question? If we identify our programs with one funding source, and as the years go by, 2 or 3 years go by, we find another funding source, can we change that funding source without getting penalized?
Yes.
Or losing our spot in the line?
I don't see a reason why we could not. Okay. This is kind of the steps that it takes to get a project through the federal process, from the application to the approval to the various reviews through committees, through the design phase, the clearances, everything to get it to the point where it can be obligated as a federal project. So roughly 59 months, 5 years would be, the normal time it would take to get it through the process to the point where it's ready to bid and construct if, federal funds have been identified for it.
Does that kind of help with that explanation earlier on? Does that kind of bring it together?
So,
Rick, asking some of those questions?
We're going to do those shovel-ready projects.
Yeah.
this is actually the process that we followed on all our conduit and fiber projects that we have. We have about 5 of them going right now. We took them through this process. It didn't take quite as long. Some projects can get through quicker, but this is kind of the general sequence.
So any of those cities that put conduit, like I was told, and when they went into repair a street, they just add some more. They obviously had all of that in their program and coordinated with the street repair.
Most of the conduit that's in the city, there's about 40 miles of conduit in the city. Most of that conduit was actually installed by the city or private development.
Oh, okay.
What these 5 projects do, they fill in the gaps between developments. They'll fill in the gaps with conduit, and then they'll pull fiber through the entire reach from one end to the other and connect to traffic signals along the way.
Okay. Yes, Bill.
Dave, this is what our senior project manager for MAG works on, this process? The federal funding piece and all that.
He's one of the people that assist with that, along with our city traffic engineer and our assistant city traffic engineer. They're very involved in this too.
Keeping us in the loop hands in the money?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been very successful in getting grant funding.
See, so engineers do have a sense of humor, don't they? Congratulations, your project.
Any other questions? Okay, Dave?
I'll just quickly go through them. I told you here's an example of a project that if we wanted to, we could complete the federal process. It would be the roadway design for Yuma Road, and we've got it to 30% design. If we wanted, or if you wanted, we could allocate about $500,000 to complete the various clearances and the final design to get it federally funded eligible in case if an opportunity came along. The bridge design is complete and it's followed federal guidelines, so it's federally fund eligible if the right funding source comes along. Okay, I'll move ahead.
I guess they're stunned. There's no questions right now.
We've been expanding our conduit and fiber system for about the last 10 years. We've got many of our signals connected to it and connected to our traffic management center. We've connected several of our buildings in the fiber network. And there is some excess capacity in the conduit system that's been installed to date. So, I mean, we can potentially make some of that excess capacity available to economic development if it would be advantageous. You've seen this visual before. It just shows where our existing conduit is and where we have fiber. This next slide, it lists the 6 projects that are actually federally funded that are going through the MAG process right now and that will be completed over the next 3 to 4 years. Along Indian School, McDowell, Strip Parkway, Van Buren, et cetera. There's about $3.6 million worth of federal funds tied up in this, and about $900,000 worth of city matching funds tied up in this. So it's about an 80-20% split, federal and city match.
Well, excuse me, what were those message boards under CF6? What are those?
There was a program that MAG offered whereby if there's a major corridor adjacent to either a county highway or a ADOT freeway, the city could get funding to put these smaller electronic message boards adjacent to a city street that could provide traffic information to
So those
motorists in
ones that move around?
Pardon?
The ones that can travel?
These would be permanently mounted at that location, and they would be designed to kind of fit in with the development in the area. I mean, there's examples in other cities where they've done that.
Okay.
They're
Someone
not
was over here
digital.
teasing me like they were digital billboards.
We'll get those someday.
Oh, stop it.
I'll just say on
May I
this.
ask a question,
Molly,
please?
go ahead.
I'm looking at the existing empty conduit, existing conduit with fiber and the proposed conduit. We don't know where our city center is going to go exactly, but are we going to have conduit all around it eventually?
We'll have conduit on Yuma Road and Estrella Parkway. The way the conduit goes, as far as it either goes with the street improvements or it goes with the MAG project to connect existing signals. So our aim is wherever we have an existing signal, we're trying to get conduit and fiber to that location. So we do have a signal there at the city center site, so there is fiber and conduit in that area.
Okay, well, what I'm really concerned with is that maybe I'm learning too much, but going to GPEC, they keep emphasizing that if we do not have the infrastructure with the fiber optics, we're never going to be able to attract a headquarters, because when they come in to build or relocate, they don't want to put in all of that infrastructure. And I just hope that we'll be just as aggressive as we can in putting in as much conduit as we can, especially in light of the bill that the President signed last week for $7 billion. And I know if we don't go after some of that and be creative and try to be maybe some of the first people that get that money, it's going to be gone in 3 or 4 or 5 years. And that's all I can say. I'm all for technology, and I'm all for conduit and fiber optic. It's just so critical to our infrastructure and to the success of this city.
Madam
And that's
Mayor,
all I have to say.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
that's exactly why we have 40 miles installed already. We install two 2-inch conduits on every project for the public, and two 1-inch conduits on every project for the private sector. So we recognize that fully, and that's why we have 40 miles in so far.
Thank you. We are going to have to, if you want to break, we have a 6 o'clock meeting, right? So I think we're going to have to call this tune in. David, thank you so much. It was a great presentation, and I think it generated a lot of conversation here and questions. So
We'll need to come back to you to talk about transportation plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
So he can get some direction.